I went into the woods thinking it would only take a few hours. That was the first mistake. I parked my car on the side of a narrow dirt road just after sunrise, locked it, and stepped past the broken wooden gate that marked the start of the trail. The air was cold enough to make my breath show, and the ground was damp from rain the night before. I remember noticing how quiet it felt. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that makes you aware of every small sound your body makes. My boots pressed into the mud, leaves stuck to the sides, and every step felt louder than it should have. I had walked trails before. This one was supposed to be simple. I looped through thick woods with a creek running through the middle. I brought water, a flashlight, my phone, and a small bag of food. Nothing fancy. I didn't bring a map because I trusted the trail markers. Red paint on trees, spaced out every few minutes. At first, I saw them clearly. The forest was dense but still open enough that sunlight came through in broken patches. Tall trees, tin trunks, branches tangled together like wires. The smell of wet leaves and soil was strong, heavy in my nose. After about an hour, the trail narrowed. The ground changed from packed dirt to uneven roots and rocks. I slowed down, watching my feet. That's when I realized I hadn't seen a red marker in a while. I told myself it was fine, that they were just spaced farther apart here. Still, I stopped and turned slowly, looking around. Everything looked the same. Trees, leaves, shadows. No clear path behind me, just flattened plants where I had walked. I kept going forward. That felt like the smarter choice at the time. As I walked, the woods seemed to close in. The trees were closer together, the light dimmer. The air felt thicker, like it was harder to breathe. I heard a snapping sound to my left and froze. It sounded like a branch breaking under weight, not the light crack of something small. I stood still for a long time, listening. My heart was loud in my ears. After a while, there was nothing else. No movement, no sound. I told myself it was probably a deer or something normal, but my body didn't relax. I checked my phone. No signal. The screen felt cold in my hand. I looked at the time and realized more hours had passed than I thought. The sun was higher, but the forest was darker. I started to feel that low panic in my stomach, the kind that makes your hands shake before your mind fully understands why. I tried to retrace my steps, turning around and walking back the way I came, but within minutes I wasn't sure anymore. The ground looked different from this angle. A fallen log I didn't remember stepping over was now in front of me. The path I thought I followed wasn't clear at all. I noticed then that the woods were too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my breathing and the soft crunch of leaves. Every time I stopped, it felt like the silence pressed closer, like something was waiting for me to move again. I started walking faster, not running, but not slow either. My legs brushed against low branches, leaving thin scratches on my skin. Zap stuck to my hands when I pushed past a pine branch. It smelled sharp and bitter. I came across the creek in the early afternoon. The water was shallow but fast, moving over dark rocks. Seeing it should have been comforting, but it wasn't. The banks were steep and muddy, and the trees around it were thicker. I followed the creek, thinking it would lead somewhere, maybe back toward the road. As I walked, I saw signs that made my stomach twist. Footprints in the mud that didn't look old. Broken branches that were snapped clean, not fallen. A piece of torn fabric caught on a thorn bush, faded and dirty. I told myself not to imagine things, but my mind kept filling in gaps. I felt watched, not in a dramatic way, but subtle, like when you feel someone standing too close behind you. Every time I turned my head quickly, there was nothing. Just trees, just shadows. Still, my pace picked up without me deciding to. Later, the light started to change. The sun dropped lower, and the forest turned gray and flat. Depth disappeared. Everything blended together. I tripped over a root and fell hard onto my hands and knees. Pain shot through my palms, and when I stood up, I saw blood smeared with dirt. My breathing was fast and uneven now. I tried to calm myself, standing still, counting my breaths, but it didn't help much. That's when I heard it again. Heavy movement. Slow, not running, not rushing. Just steady steps somewhere behind me, leaves crunching. A pause, then more steps. I didn't turn around right away. I was too afraid of what I might see. I started walking again, then faster, then almost running. The sounds followed. They didn't get closer, but they didn't stop either. The woods grew darker as evening came. Shadows stretched long and strange across the ground. My flashlight felt small and weak when I turned it on.
The beam barely cut through the trees. The ground was flattened, the grass pressed down in wide patches. I reached a clearing I didn't remember seeing before. In the center was an old hunting blind, half-collapsed, wood rotting and dark. The sight of it made my chest tighten. This wasn't a place people used anymore, but it meant people had been here before, recently enough to leave marks. I didn't stay there long. The feeling was wrong. Thick, heavy. I moved on, pushing through brush until my arms burned. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel sweat cooling on my neck. The steps behind me stopped at some point, but that didn't make me feel better. Silence felt worse now. Night came fast. The temperature dropped, and my hands went numb. I wrapped my arms around myself while walking, trying to stay warm and moving at the same time. The flashlight beam shook as my grip weakened. My legs felt heavy, like they didn't fully belong to me anymore. Then finally I smelled smoke. Faint but real. That smell pulled me forward more than fear ever could. I followed it, ignoring scratches, ignoring pain. The trees thinned, and I saw a weak orange glow ahead. Not a campfire, but a distant light, steady and low.
I broke through the last line of trees and stumbled onto the dirt road.
The same one I parked on.
My car was there, exactly where I left it. The relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. I unlocked the car with shaking hands, climbed inside, and locked the doors immediately. I sat there for a long time before starting the engine, just breathing, listening to the normal sounds of the car around me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what the woods felt like now. I knew how easy it was to disappear inside them, how quiet they could become, how wrong everything felt when you stayed too long. I made it out, but the feeling didn't leave me. Even now, when I think about it, I remember the sound of steps behind me and the way the silence felt alive. I never went back to that trail, and I never will. I was supposed to drive through before dark, take a shortcut that the map showed as a thin gray line, and be back on the main road in less than an hour. The day had been normal. The sky was clear when I left. My phone had signal. I remember thinking the drive would be quiet and boring, which felt fine to me. The road slowly turned from smooth pavement into rough asphalt, then into packed dirt. Trees closed in on both sides. Tall pines blocked the sky and made the light look dull even though the sun was still up. The farther I went, the less confident I felt, but I kept driving because turning around felt like admitting I had messed up. My car started to shake more as the road dipped and rose. Small rocks hit the bottom of the car, making sharp sounds that made my stomach tighten. Then the car jerked hard to the right. I felt the steering wheel pull from my hands. There was a loud thump, and the car slowed fast. I pulled over, heart pounding, and shut the engine off. When I stepped out, the smell of dirt and pine hit me right away. The forest felt heavy, like it was pressing in on me. I looked at the tire and saw it was completely flat, torn on the side. The spare was useless because the jack was bent. I tried my phone. No signal. I walked a few steps up the road, holding the phone up, turning in circles. Nothing. The light was already fading. The woods got darker fast, like someone was turning down a dimmer switch. I told myself to stay calm and think clearly. I could wait in the car, but I did not know when someone would come by. I could also walk, but I had no idea how far the main road was. I listened for sounds of cars. I heard only wind in the trees and insects starting their night noise. I locked the car and started walking down the road in the direction I had been going. The dirt was uneven, and I had to watch every step. My shoes were not meant for hiking, and my feet started to hurt quickly. After maybe 20 minutes, I saw something through the trees on the right. A small clearing opened up, and inside it was an old wooden structure. It looked like a hunting cabin or a shed. The roof was half collapsed and the door hung open. I did not want to go near it, but the light was almost gone, and I needed shelter. Inside, the air smelled stale and damp. The floor was covered in dirt and leaves. There was an old table, broken chairs, and empty cans rusted through. I checked every corner, my heart racing, even though I told myself it was just a place, not a threat. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and pulled my jacket tighter around me. The woods outside were loud now. Branches cracked. Something moved through the brush. I tried to tell myself it was animals, but my body did not believe that.
Time moved slowly. My legs went numb from sitting still. At some point, I heard a sound that made me sit up straight. It was not an animal sound. It was a steady crunch, like footsteps on dry leaves. It stopped. Then it started again, slow and careful. I held my breath. The steps circled the cabin. I could see a shadow pass over the broken window opening. My hands started shaking so badly I had to press them against my thighs. I stayed still for a long time. The footsteps moved away. I waited even longer, counting my breaths, listening. When I finally stood up, my muscles ached. I decided I could not stay there. Being trapped in that cabin felt worse than being out in the open. I slipped out the back and moved into the trees, trying to keep low and quiet. The forest at night is not silent. It is full of small sounds that make everything feel alive and watching. Every stick I stepped on sounded loud to me. I moved slowly, feeling my way forward, using the faint light of the moon to guide me. I tried to keep a straight direction, but everything looked the same. Trees, shadows, darkness. After some time, I noticed something wrong. The woods felt too quiet in one direction, like the normal sounds were missing. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. Closer, this time, matching my pace. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they moved. Panic spread through me in a cold wave. I wanted to run, but I knew running would make noise and tire me out fast. I changed direction suddenly, pushing through thick brush. Thorns scratched my arms and face. I bit my lip to keep from making any sound. I crouched behind a fallen tree and waited. My chest hurt from breathing so shallow. The footsteps came closer, slow and steady. I saw a shape move between the trees. It was a person. I could tell by the way it stood and shifted weight. There was no flashlight, no sound of gear, just a dark figure blending into the woods. I stayed frozen until my legs burned. The figure moved past me, close enough that I could smell sweat and dirt. When it was gone, I crawled away on my hands and knees until I could not hear anything anymore. I did not stop moving after that. Fear pushed me forward even when my body wanted to quit. Hours passed, or at least it felt like hours. I stumbled into a narrow path that looked slightly more worn than the forest floor. I followed it, hoping it led somewhere. My throat was dry. My head ached. Every shadow looked like a person waiting for me. The path slowly widened and turned into a gravel road. I almost cried when I saw it. I stepped onto the road and followed it, not caring anymore if I was visible. After a while, I saw headlights in the distance. I stood still, too tired to wave. The car slowed when it reached me. The driver stopped and I moved back instinctively, ready to run, but the car stayed still. I walked past it instead, keeping my distance, and kept going down the road.
Eventually, the trees thinned, and I reached a place with lights and buildings. I sat on the ground near a closed store until morning came. When the sun rose, everything looked normal again, which felt wrong after the night I had survived. Later, I learned that the area was known for illegal camps and people who lived off the grid and did not want to be found. Some hikers had gone missing there over the years. I never went back to get my car. I did not need it. I knew what had followed me was real, human, and close enough to touch. I still think about how quiet the woods became when it was near, and how easily I could have disappeared if I had made one wrong move. That night did not end with rescue or comfort. It ended with me walking out alive, knowing how thin the line is between being found and being gone forever. I went into the woods because I wanted quiet. That was the whole reason. I had taken a week off work, turned off my phone, and drove out to a state forest I had never been to before. It was late fall. The trees were mostly bare, and the ground was thick with wet leaves that stuck to my boots. The air smelled like dirt and cold metal. I parked at a small pull-off with no other cars and followed a narrow trail that looked less used than the main ones. I told myself that was fine. I liked being alone. I liked the feeling that nothing was watching me. At first, everything felt normal. The trail dipped and rose, winding through tall trees with gray trunks and broken branches hanging overhead. My breath came out white. I could hear birds moving somewhere above me and the soft sound of water far away. I walked for a long time, maybe 2 hours, until the trail faded into something more like a suggestion than a path. I didn't panic. I had a map and a compass. I had water and food. I knew I could turn back whenever I wanted. That feeling didn't last. I started noticing small things that didn't fit. A piece of orange tape tied around a branch, old and dirty, like it had been there a while. A boot print pressed deep into the mud near a fallen log, larger than mine and newer. The forest was quiet in a way that felt wrong, like the normal background noise had been turned down. I kept walking, telling myself people used these woods all the time. Hunters, hikers, rangers. There was nothing strange about signs of other people. The light began to change. Clouds rolled in, thick and low, making the woods darker even though it was still early. I checked my map again and realized I had drifted farther east than I thought. I turned to head back, but the way I came from didn't look the same anymore. Every tree looked like every other tree. The ground sloped in a way I didn't remember. My chest tightened and my steps slowed without me meaning to. Then I smelled it. It was faint at first, like rot and iron mixed together. I followed the smell without thinking, pushing through brush that scratched my arms and snagged my jacket. I came into a small clearing and the smell hit me harder. In the center was a pile of animal remains half covered with leaves. Deer bones, stripped clean in places with dark stains soaked into the dirt. There were wires and hooks nearby, carefully placed, not scattered. This wasn't something that happened by accident. Someone had done this on purpose. I backed away slowly, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. As I turned, my foot caught on something thin and tight. I stumbled forward and barely caught myself on a tree. I looked down and saw a wire stretched low between two rocks. It was almost invisible against the ground. A snare, the kind meant to catch animals by the leg or neck. If I had fallen the wrong way, it could have been bad. That was the moment I knew I was not just lost. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I started moving faster, not running, but close. I tried to stay quiet, placing my feet carefully, listening between each step. Every sound felt loud. Laughs cracking, branches snapping, my own breathing. I kept checking behind me, expecting to see someone, but the trees stayed empty. That somehow made it worse. As the light faded more, I saw a shape ahead that didn't belong. A tarp stretched low between trees, dark green and sagging. Beneath it were crates, a rusted barrel, and a folded chair. Everything looked used but not abandoned. There were fresh tracks in the mud. The ground was packed down in places where someone stood often. I could picture it too clearly. Someone spending time here, watching the woods, setting traps, waiting. I moved away from the camp as quietly as I could, my hands shaking. I didn't know which direction was right anymore. The compass needles spun and settled, but it didn't help. Panic started to creep in, slow and heavy, the kind that makes it hard to think. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on simple things. Find downhill, find water, find a road. That was when I heard movement behind me. Not an animal, not wind, slow, steady steps that stopped when I stopped. I didn't turn around right away. I kept walking, my skin prickling, my back burning with the feeling of being watched. The steps followed again, careful, controlled. Whoever it was knew how to move through the woods. I ran. Branches slapped at my face. Roots grabbed at my feet. I didn't care about the noise anymore. I just wanted distance. My lungs burned and my legs felt weak, but fear pushed me forward. I crashed through brush and slid down a steep slope, landing hard at the bottom. Pain shot through my ankle, sharp and hot, but I got up anyway. I ended up near a stream, shallow but fast-moving. The water was icy, soaking my boots as I crossed. I kept going on the other side, hoping to break whatever trail I had left. I hid behind a thick cluster of trees and crouched there, barely breathing. The footsteps reached the stream. I heard the water splash. I closed my eyes, pressing my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Leaves shifted. A branch snapped. The steps moved past me, close enough that I could hear fabric brushing against bark. I didn't look. I didn't dare. I stayed there for a long time after the sounds faded. My body shook so hard my teeth chattered. When I finally moved again, the sky was almost dark. I limped, favoring my ankle, moving slowly and carefully. Every shadow looked like a person. Every sound made my heart jump. Hours passed. I don't know how many. The woods thinned and the ground leveled out. Then I saw something that made me almost collapse with relief.
A strip of gray through the trees. A road. I stumbled out of the woods just as a car passed, its headlights sweeping over me. I stood there, dirty, soaked, shaking, until another car stopped. I don't remember much after that. The warmth of the car. The way my hands wouldn't stop trembling. The long ride to town. Later, after I was safe, I learned more. Rangers found the camp I had seen. They found dozens of illegal traps, animal remains, and signs that someone had been living deep in the forest for a long time. A man was arrested a few days later after being caught near another trail. He had a history of hunting violations and assault. He told police he liked places where people didn't usually go. I still think about the wire near my feet, about how quiet the woods were, about the way those footsteps matched mine. I went into the forest looking for silence. I found proof that being alone does not always mean being safe. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't wander off trails. And when I think about those woods, I don't imagine monsters or ghosts. I imagine something much worse. A real person, patient and hidden, waiting.
I had been walking for hours deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone before. The sun had started its slow descent behind the trees, and the forest was swallowing the light. At first, it had been quiet and even beautiful, the way the golden sunbeams slanted through the branches, illuminating little patches of moss and fallen leaves. But as I walked, the quiet began to feel heavier, more pressing. Every step I took on the dry leaves made a sharp crack, and I started noticing the small noises that were always there but that I'd ignored before. The distant snap of a twig, the rustle of some small animal in the underbrush, the creak of branches overhead as the wind shifted. I had come here to clear my mind, to escape the city for a few hours and just breathe. I hadn't expected to get lost, but somewhere along the way, the trail I had been following disappeared under a thick layer of fallen leaves, and suddenly all the landmarks I had been using to guide me vanished. I realized then that I hadn't brought a map and my phone had no signal. Panic bubbled up in my chest, but I tried to push it down. I told myself to stay calm, that I could find my way back. I just had to retrace my steps. But retracing my steps was harder than I thought. Everything looked the same. Endless trees, shadowed hollows, a ground cluttered with sticks and pine needles. The woods seemed to stretch on forever in every direction. The sun dipped lower, and shadows began to grow long and black. The air turned colder, carrying a damp smell that made my nose twitch. My heart started to pound in a way that I couldn't ignore. Every time I heard a sound, maybe a bird, maybe something else, I jumped. My backpack felt heavier with every step, though I hadn't even picked up anything extra. I tried to remember the stories I'd read about people lost in the woods, and I hated myself a little for not being more prepared. A flashlight would have been a lifesaver now, but mine had died that morning. Hours seemed to pass, though it might have been less. I had tried to follow the faint outline of a path I thought I remembered, but it kept disappearing into thick undergrowth. My shoes were wet from stepping in shallow streams, and the mud was clinging to my socks. Every sound made me tense, the flapping of a crow overhead, the rustle of something small moving in the brush. I started imagining eyes watching me, though I knew it was probably just a deer or a rabbit. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. As darkness settled, the forest changed. The shapes of the trees became more menacing, the low branches seemed to reach out. My legs ached from walking, my stomach growled, and my hands were cold despite the hoodie I was wearing. I considered staying put, but I knew that would only make me more lost. I had to keep moving. I tried to remember the sound of the river I had crossed earlier, thinking I could find it and use it to guide myself. Eventually, I stumbled across a narrow, muddy trail, barely wide enough for one person. I hoped it would lead me somewhere, anything. The further I walked, the darker it became. The moon had risen, but it was hidden behind thick clouds. I kept my eyes on the ground, scanning for roots and rocks that could trip me. My mind was racing, thinking of all the things that could go wrong. What if I twisted my ankle? What if I fell and couldn't get back? I felt a cold wave of fear, one that made me start shivering uncontrollably. I stopped for a moment, leaned against a tree, and tried to steady my breathing. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then I heard it, a noise that wasn't part of the usual forest sounds. It was faint at first, like a rustle, then sharper, like someone or something moving through the underbrush.
My stomach dropped. I froze, straining to hear, and the sound stopped. I told myself it was probably an animal. Deer, maybe. But the rational thoughts didn't make me feel any safer. My imagination, fueled by exhaustion and fear, started conjuring worse things. Someone else in the woods, maybe even following me. I started walking again, faster this time, trying not to make noise, but also desperate to get somewhere safe. I reached a clearing eventually, and I could see a faint outline of a dirt road in the distance. Relief surged through me, but it came with a new wave of caution. Roads meant people, but they also meant I could be spotted by someone with bad intentions. My stomach tightened with anxiety, but I kept moving, focusing on the road, willing myself to get there. Every sound now made me flinch, but I forced myself to ignore it. By the time I reached the edge of the clearing, I could make out a small car parked at the side of the dirt road. It looked abandoned, the doors closed but a thin layer of dust covering the windshield. My legs felt like lead, but I stumbled onto the road. The ground was uneven, but I didn't care. I was moving toward safety. I noticed tire tracks in the dirt, fresh enough that I knew someone had passed recently. I didn't know if it was a local, a hiker, or someone else, but it gave me hope. I followed the road, careful to stay in the middle where I could see any movement ahead. My phone still had no signal, but at least I was on a recognizable path. I kept my flashlight app on, even though it made a small, weak circle of light in front of me. Every shadow now seemed alive, but I forced myself to keep going. I passed a bend in the road and saw a small wooden cabin off to the side. Smoke was curling faintly from the chimney. My relief was overwhelming. I ran toward it, my legs almost giving out from exhaustion. An older man was outside, tending to a small fire. When he saw me, he didn't ask anything, just gestured for me to come closer. I approached, my chest heaving, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my flashlight. He handed me a blanket and gestured toward the cabin. Inside there was warmth, food, and a phone with a signal. I sank into a chair, finally able to let my tension go. I called my parents, letting them know I was safe. As I sat there, wrapped in the blanket and listening to the soft crackle of the fire, I realized how lucky I had been. I hadn't seen anyone with bad intentions, but the fear and uncertainty had been real enough to make me question everything I had thought about being alone in the woods. My clothes were wet and muddy, my shoes ruined, and my body ached all over, but I was alive. I understood, in a way I never had before, the importance of preparation, awareness, and respect for the wilderness.
Eventually, the man offered me a ride back to the main road where I could get a taxi.
As we drove, I looked back at the forest, dark and silent, and felt a strange mix of fear and awe. I had survived because I hadn't given in to panic, because I had kept moving even when I was scared, and because I had been lucky enough to find someone willing to help. By the time I got home, late at night, I was exhausted but safe. I showered, changed into dry clothes, and sat by the window for a long time, thinking about what had happened.
The woods were beautiful, terrifying, and unforgiving. I promised myself I would never take them lightly again.
I had walked into the unknown, faced my fear, and come out the other side, and in the quiet of my room, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I was okay, I was safe, and for the first time in hours, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since I had wandered into the trees.
I was supposed to drive through before dark, take a shortcut that the map showed as a thin gray line, and be back on the main road in less than an hour. The day had been normal. The sky was clear when I left. My phone had signal. I remember thinking the drive would be quiet and boring, which felt fine to me. The road slowly turned from smooth pavement into rough asphalt, then into packed dirt. Trees closed in on both sides. Tall pines blocked the sky and made the light look dull even though the sun was still up. The farther I went, the less confident I felt, but I kept driving because turning around felt like admitting I had messed up. My car started to shake more as the road dipped and rose. Small rocks hit the bottom of the car, making sharp sounds that made my stomach tighten. Then the car jerked hard to the right. I felt the steering wheel pull from my hands. There was a loud thump and the car slowed fast. I pulled over, heart pounding, and shut the engine off. When I stepped out, the smell of dirt and pine hit me right away. The forest felt heavy, like it was pressing in on me. I looked at the tire and saw it was completely flat, torn on the side. The spare was useless because the jack was bent. I tried my phone. No signal. I walked a few steps up the road, holding the phone up, turning in circles. Nothing. The light was already fading. The woods got darker fast, like someone was turning down a dimmer switch. I told myself to stay calm and think clearly. I could wait in the car, but I did not know when someone would come by. I could also walk, but I had no idea how far the main road was. I listened for sounds of cars. I heard only wind in the trees and insects starting their night noise. I locked the car and started walking down the road in the direction I had been going. The dirt was uneven and I had to watch every step. My shoes were not meant for hiking and my feet started to hurt quickly. After maybe 20 minutes, I saw something through the trees on the right. A small clearing opened up and inside it was an old wooden structure. It looked like a hunting cabin or a shed. The roof was half collapsed and the door hung open. I did not want to go near it, but the light was almost gone and I needed shelter. Inside, the air smelled stale and damp. The floor was covered in dirt and leaves. There was an old table, broken chairs, and empty cans rusted through. I checked every corner, my heart racing, even though I told myself it was just a place, not a threat. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and pulled my jacket tighter around me. The woods outside were loud now. Branches cracked. Something moved through the brush. I tried to tell myself it was animals, but my body did not believe that. Time moved slowly. My legs went numb from sitting still. At some point, I heard a sound that made me sit up straight. It was not an animal sound. It was a steady crunch, like footsteps on dry leaves. It stopped. Then it started again, slow and careful. I held my breath. The steps circled the cabin. I could see a shadow pass over the broken window opening. My hands started shaking so badly I had to press them against my thighs. I stayed still for a long time. The footsteps moved away. I waited even longer, counting my breaths, listening. When I finally stood up, my muscles ached. I decided I could not stay there. Being trapped in that cabin felt worse than being out in the open. I slipped out the back and moved into the trees, trying to keep low and quiet. The forest at night is not silent. It is full of small sounds that make everything feel alive and watching. Every stick I stepped on sounded loud to me. I moved slowly, feeling my way forward, using the faint light of the moon to guide me. I tried to keep a straight direction, but everything looked the same. Trees, shadows, darkness. After some time, I noticed something wrong. The woods felt too quiet in one direction, like the normal sounds were missing. Then I heard it again, footsteps. Closer this time, matching my pace. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they moved. Panic spread through me in a cold wave. I wanted to run, but I knew running would make noise and tire me out fast. I changed direction suddenly, pushing through thick brush. Taunts scratched my arms and face. I bit my lip to keep from making any sound. I crouched behind a fallen tree and waited. My chest hurt from breathing so shallow. The footsteps came closer, slow and steady. I saw a shape move between the trees. It was a person. I could tell by the way it stood and shifted weight. There was no flashlight, no sound of gear, just a dark figure blending into the woods. I stayed frozen until my legs burned. The figure moved past me, close enough that I could smell sweat and dirt. When it was gone, I crawled away on my hands and knees until I could not hear anything anymore. I did not stop moving after that. Fear pushed me forward even when my body wanted to quit. Hours passed, or at least it felt like hours. I stumbled into a narrow path that looked slightly more worn than the forest floor. I followed it, hoping it led somewhere. My throat was dry, my head ached. Every shadow looked like a person waiting for me. The path slowly widened and turned into a gravel road. I almost cried when I saw it. I stepped onto the road and followed it, not caring anymore if I was visible. After a while, I saw headlights in the distance. I stood still, too tired to wave. The car slowed when it reached me. The driver stopped, and I moved back instinctively, ready to run, but the car stayed still. I walked past it instead, keeping my distance, and kept going down the road. Eventually, the trees thinned, and I reached a place with lights and buildings. I sat on the ground near a closed store until morning came. When the sun rose, everything looked normal again, which felt wrong after the night I had survived. Later, I learned that the area was known for illegal camps and people who lived off the grid and did not want to be found. Some hikers had gone missing there over the years. I never went back to get my car. I did not need it. I knew what had followed me was real, human, and close enough to touch. I still think about how quiet the woods became when it was near, and how easily I could have disappeared if I had made one wrong move.
That night did not end with rescue or comfort. It ended with me walking out alive, knowing how thin the line is between being found and being gone forever.
I went into the woods thinking it would clear my head. That sounds stupid now, but at the time it felt normal. I had done it before. There was a long stretch of forest not far from the edge of town, the kind people pretend is safe because it has a marked trail and a small gravel parking area. I parked my car there late in the afternoon, later than I should have. The sun was already leaning low, the light slanted and yellow, making everything look softer than it really was. I told myself I would only walk for an hour, maybe less, just enough to feel tired and quiet. The air smelled like damp leaves and dirt. It had rained the night before, and the ground was still soft in places. My shoes picked up mud right away. I remember noticing how quiet it was, not silent, but empty. No cars, no people, no distant machines, just wind moving through branches and the constant sound of my own steps. That sound followed me, steady and loud, because there was nothing else to compete with it. The trail was narrow but clear. Trees pressed in on both sides, tall and old, their trunks dark with moisture. Some of them had scratches and marks that looked old, like they had been there for years. I didn't think much about it. Forests are full of marks. I walked deeper, counting my steps without meaning to, letting my thoughts drift. Time felt stretched out, like it always does when you're alone and moving. After a while, I noticed the light changing. The sun slipped lower and the shadows grew longer and thicker. The woods felt heavier, like the air itself had weight. I checked my phone, mostly out of habit. The signal was weak, one bar flickering on and off. I didn't turn back right away, which I should have. I told myself I still had time. The trail began to split into smaller paths, some barely visible, just slightly flattened ground where others had walked before. I stuck to what looked like the main trail, but it became less clear the farther I went. Fallen branches crossed it, leaves covered it in places. I had to watch my feet more carefully. I slowed down without realizing it. That's when I heard something behind me. At first, I thought it was just my own movement echoing. Woods can play tricks on sound. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. My chest felt tight, like I had just missed a step on the stairs. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Wind moved through the leaves. Somewhere far away, a bird made a sharp noise. Nothing else. I started walking again, slower this time. After a few steps, I heard it again. Not footsteps exactly, but something close to them. A soft crunch, like leaves being pressed down. It wasn't in a steady rhythm like mine. It was uneven. I told myself it was an animal. Deer, maybe. Small animals move through here all the time. I kept walking. The feeling didn't go away. It got worse. My skin felt tight, like it does when you know you're being watched but don't know from where. I didn't turn around right away because I was afraid of what I might see. I focused on the path ahead, on the shapes of trees, on breathing normally. The trail dipped slightly, then curved. When I reached the curve, I stopped again and turned around. There was nothing there, just the path I had walked, empty and quiet, but something felt wrong about it. The space behind me looked different than it had before, darker somehow. The shadows between the trees seemed deeper, thicker, like they could hide anything. I turned back and kept moving, faster now. My steps were louder. I didn't like that, but I didn't slow down. I wanted to reach a point where the trail was clear again. I wanted to see something familiar. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I almost jumped out of my skin. It was nothing, just a notification that didn't even load because of the signal. The sounds behind me came back. This time I was sure they weren't mine. I could hear my own steps clearly, and the other sounds didn't match them. Sometimes they were too close together. Sometimes they stopped when I stopped, but not immediately. There was a delay, like whatever it was had to decide whether to keep moving. I told myself again that it was an animal. I repeated it in my head like a rule. Animals are scared of people. Animals don't stalk. Animals don't follow trails like this. The last thought slipped in without my permission, and once it was there, I couldn't push it away. The trail ended suddenly. I stood at the edge of it, staring at a patch of woods that looked untouched. Not clear path forward. Just trees, bushes, and uneven ground. I turned around, confused. The trail behind me looked different now, too.
narrower, less clear. I was sure this was the same way I came, but it didn't feel like it. My sense of direction slipped, like trying to hold on to smoke. That's when panic started to set in for real. My breathing became shallow. My hands felt cold. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself to think logically. I hadn't gone that far. I could just follow my steps back. I looked down at the ground, trying to find my footprints in the mud. There were some, but they were mixed with others. Some looked older, some looked fresh. I couldn't tell which ones were mine anymore. The sound came again, closer than before. Very close. I didn't look back this time. I started walking fast, then faster, trying to retrace my path. Branches brushed against my arms. Leaves stuck to my shoes. I almost tripped twice. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst.
The woods felt tighter, like they were closing in around me.
I smelled something strange then. Not rot exactly, but something sour and human. Sweat and old fabric. It made my stomach turn. That smell didn't belong in the forest, and I knew it. I broke into a run.
Running in the woods is a bad idea, but fear doesn't care about logic. My breath came out in harsh gasps. My legs burned. The ground was uneven, and I stumbled more than once, barely catching myself. The sounds behind me grew louder. Faster. Whatever it was keeping up easily. I reached a small clearing by accident, a patch where a few trees had fallen long ago. The sky was visible there, darker now, the sun almost gone. For a brief second, I felt relief, open space, visibility. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the ground near one of the fallen trees were old items. A pan backpack, a shoe, dirty and stiff. Pieces of cloth that looked like they had once been clothes. They were scattered, not neatly placed, like someone had dropped them in a hurry or dragged them there. I froze, staring at them, my mind struggling to understand what I was seeing. The sound behind me stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It pressed in on me, thick and heavy. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in my ears. I slowly turned my head, every muscle tight, every nerve screaming. I didn't see a monster. I didn't see anything supernatural. I saw a person. He was standing partly behind a tree, close enough that I could see the dirt on his clothes. The way his posture was slightly hunched, like his body had learned to move quietly for a long time. His face was thin and dirty, his eyes fixed on me in a way that wasn't curious or surprised. It was focused, like I was something he had been waiting for. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body moved before my mind did. I turned and ran again, harder than before, straight through the clearing and into the trees on the other side. Branches cut into my arms. Thorns tore at my skin. I didn't feel the pain until later. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran downhill, following the slope, hoping it would lead somewhere. The sounds came back, crashing through the woods behind me. He didn't bother being quiet anymore. My lungs burned. My legs felt weak. I thought I was going to fall, and I knew if I did, that would be the end. Somehow, I kept going. The ground leveled out, and then suddenly I broke through the trees onto something hard. A road. I stumbled onto the asphalt and almost collapsed. I didn't stop running until I reached the middle of it, turning in circles, my chest heaving. The woods at the edge of the road were dark and still. No one came out. No one followed. After a long time, I realized I was alone. Cars eventually passed. Someone stopped. The rest is clear in a way the woods never were. Police searched the area. They found more items. They found signs of someone living out there for a long time. They never found him. I don't walk in the woods alone anymore. Not marked trails. Not familiar places. Not anywhere quiet enough for my own footsteps to be the loudest sound. I learned that day that the woods don't have to be haunted to be dangerous. They just have to be empty enough for the wrong kind of person to hide. The woods were supposed to be a short walk, a quiet break from everything. I parked my car on the side of the gravel road just before sunset, grabbed my small backpack, and followed the narrow trail I had walked before. It felt normal at first. The air smelled wet and cold, and the trees were close together, tall and dark, but nothing felt wrong yet. I kept telling myself I would turn back once the light started to fade. The path slowly disappeared the farther I went. Leaves covered the ground, hiding the dirt trail, and every step made a soft crunch that sounded louder than it should have. The woods felt empty, but not quiet. There were small sounds everywhere. Branches rubbing together. Wind moving through the leaves. Something small running across the ground. I kept walking because turning around felt pointless. I thought I could still find my way back. When the sun dropped behind the trees, everything changed fast. The woods got darker in minutes, not slowly like I expected. Shadows filled in the spaces between trees until it felt like I was walking through a tunnel. I took my phone out to use the flashlight, but the battery was already low. I told myself to stay calm and keep moving. Panic would only make things worse. I tried to remember the direction of the road. I turned slightly left, then right, hoping to hit the trail again. Instead, the ground started to slope downward. The trees grew closer together, their roots sticking out of the ground like broken bones. I almost fell twice. My breathing got heavier, louder in my ears, and I hated how easy it was to hear myself in the dark. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The woods no longer felt empty. I could not see anyone, but the feeling of being alone was gone. The air felt thicker, like something was nearby, watching but staying still. I stopped walking and listened. My own heartbeat felt too loud. Somewhere deeper into woods, a branch snapped. It was not the sound of something small. It was slow and heavy. I stood frozen, my phone light shaking in my hand. I waited for another sound. A few seconds passed, then more movement, closer this time. Leaves were being pushed aside, not stepped on lightly. Whatever it was not trying to be quiet. That scared me more than silence would have. I moved again, forcing my legs to work. I picked a direction and walked fast, not running because I knew that would make noise and waste energy. My shoes slipped on damp leaves and my hands brushed against rough bark and low branches. My jacket caught on thorns and I felt the fabric tear. I did not stop to check it. The flashlight began to dim. I tapped the phone, trying to keep the light steady. The darkness pressed in from every side. I felt small, like the woods were closing around me on purpose. My thoughts kept jumping to worst-case endings and I had to fight to push them away. I focused on the ground in front of me, one step at a time. Then I saw something that did not belong. Between two trees, far ahead, there was a shape that looked straight, too straight to be natural. I moved closer and realized it was an old fence post, half-rotted and leaning. That meant people had been here before, maybe a long time ago. Relief washed over me, but it was thin and weak. I followed the line of broken posts. The fence itself was mostly gone, just rusted wire hanging loose and disappearing into the ground. My hands shook as I pushed past it. On the other side, the ground was more open. Fewer trees, more space between them. I thought I might be close to the road or at least a clearing. That was when I heard footsteps behind me. They were not rushed. They were steady and spaced out, matching the sound of someone walking without fear. Each step pressed into the leaves with weight. I did not turn around. I already knew what I would see would not help me. My body reacted before my mind did, and I started running. The woods became a blur. Branches hit my face and arms. My lungs burned and my legs felt weak, but I kept going. I did not know where I was headed anymore. I only knew I needed distance. The footsteps stayed behind me, never getting closer, never falling back. That was the worst part. Whatever was following me did not need to hurry. I tripped over a root and fell hard. The impact knocked the air out of me, and for a moment I could not breathe. My phone flew from my hand and landed face down. I scrambled for it, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely hold it. When the light came back on, I forced myself up and kept moving, limping now, pain shooting up my ankle. I reached a small clearing where the trees pulled back just enough to show the sky. The moon was high, pale and thin. In the center of the clearing was an old structure, barely standing. It looked like a hunting shed or storage cabin, the kind people forget about and leave to rot. One wall had collapsed, and the roof sagged in the middle. I did not want to go inside, but staying out in the open felt worse. I slipped through the broken wall and crouched low. The
The smell inside was strong, damp wood and old dirt. I turned off my phone light and waited, holding my breath. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the clearing. I could sense the presence even without seeing it. Leaves shifted slowly, like someone circling, taking their time. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making noise. My heart felt like it was going to break through my chest. Time stretched in a way that did not feel real. Seconds felt like minutes. My leg ached and my ankle throbbed, but I did not move. I focused on staying still, on being quiet enough to disappear. Eventually, the movement faded. The woods went back to their normal sounds. Wind, leaves, distant animals. I waited longer than felt safe, then longer still. When I finally turned my phone light back on, the battery warning flashed red. I stayed in the shed until the first hint of gray touched the sky. Dawn came slowly, and with it, a thin layer of fog that made the woods look unreal. I stepped out carefully, every sense sharp. There were no footsteps behind me anymore. In the daylight I could see more clearly. Not far from the clearing, there was a wider path, barely visible but real. I followed it, moving slowly because of my ankle. After what felt like hours, I heard something that made my chest loosen for the first time. The sound of a car passing on a road. I reached the gravel road just as the sun rose fully. My car was still there, untouched. I leaned against it and let myself breathe. My hands were scratched and dirty. My clothes were torn. My leg hurt badly. But I was alive and I was out of the woods. I drove straight to the nearest town and went to the hospital. They wrapped my ankle and cleaned the cuts. I did not tell them everything. Some things are easier to keep to yourself, especially when you do not have proof. Days later, when the fear finally settled into something quieter, I tried to understand what happened. It could have been someone living out there, watching the woods, using them as cover. It could have been someone looking for a chance. I do not know. What I do know is that the woods were not empty that night, and they never really are. I do not walk alone anymore. I do not go into places where help is far away. Sometimes at night, when everything is quiet, I still hear those slow footsteps in my head. Steady, patient, waiting.
I went into the woods alone because I wanted quiet. I told myself it was just a short hike, something simple to clear my head. The trailhead was almost empty, just one old sign with peeling paint and a dirt path cutting into the trees. The air smelled wet, like old leaves and soil. The sky was gray but calm, and I remember thinking it would probably rain later, not a big deal. I had a small backpack with water, a granola bar, my phone, and a thin jacket. I did not tell anyone exactly where I was going. That still bothers me. At first, everything felt normal. The trees were tall and close together, blocking most of the light. The ground was soft and uneven, and my shoes sank into the dirt with every step. You could hear birds far away and the sound of wind moving through the leaves. It felt peaceful, almost boring, which was what I wanted. I followed the narrow trail, watching for roots so I would not trip. Time passed slowly, and the deeper I went, the more the forest swallowed sound. Even my footsteps felt quiet. After a while, the trail became harder to see. It split into smaller paths that looked like they had been made by animals or maybe people who did not want to be seen. I chose one without thinking too much about it. The trees grew thicker and bushes scratched my legs as I passed. I checked my phone for signal and saw nothing. The battery was already lower than I liked. I told myself not to panic and kept walking. That was when I noticed the first strange thing. On the ground near a tree, there was a small pile of stones stacked carefully on top of each other. It did not look natural. Someone had placed them there. I stopped and stared at it longer than I should have. My chest felt tight, but I convinced myself it could be a marker or just someone bored. I walked past it and kept going. The forest felt different after that. The air felt heavier and everything seemed too quiet. The birds had stopped. Even the wind felt weaker. I became very aware of my breathing and how loud it sounded in my ears. I tried to walk calmly, but my steps started to rush without me meaning to. I looked back more often than before, even though I knew there was probably nothing there. A few minutes later, I heard something that was not an animal. It was the sound of something heavy moving through leaves. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I stopped walking and the sound stopped too. I stood there holding my breath, listening so hard my head started to hurt. After a moment, I heard it again, farther away this time. I told myself it could be a deer, but the way it moved did not feel right. I started walking again, trying to stay on what looked like the clearest path. My heart was beating hard now, and my hands felt shaky. I noticed scratches on tree trunks, deep ones, like someone had dragged something sharp along the bark. They were too straight to be from animals. Some of them were fresh, the wood underneath still light in color. That was when fear really set in. Not sudden panic, but a slow, heavy fear that settled into my stomach. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The battery dropped another %, and I felt stupid for even looking. I kept moving, telling myself the best thing to do was not stop. The ground started to slope downward, and my shoes slipped on wet leaves. I nearly fell once and scraped my hand on a rock. The sting grounded me in a strange way, made everything feel more real. Then I saw the backpack. It was lying near a fallen log, half covered in leaves. It looked old and dirty, like it had been there for a long time. One strap was torn. I froze when I saw it. I did not touch it. I just stared. The thought that someone else had been here and did not leave made my throat feel dry. I realized then that I was not just lost. I was somewhere I should not be. The sounds came back, closer this time, leaves shifting. A branch snapping. I did not wait to understand it. I turned and walked faster than that. My breathing became rough and my chest hurt. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding. I tried to stay quiet, but fear made me clumsy. Twigs cracked under my feet and branches pulled at my clothes. I started to smell something strange, like smoke mixed with rot. I followed the smell by accident because it was the only clear direction. That led me to a small clearing. In the center was a blackened circle of dirt, like an old fire pit. Around it were more signs of someone staying there. Flattened grass. A piece of torn fabric caught on a bush. I felt sick. I knew I needed to leave immediately. That was when I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. Not hiding anymore. I did not look back. I ran. Running through the woods is nothing like running on a road. Everything fights you. The ground shifts. Roots grab at your feet. Branches hit your face and arms. My lungs burned and my legs started to feel weak, but I did not stop. I ran downhill, hoping it would lead somewhere. I fell hard once and rolled, scraping my knee badly. Blood soaked into my pants, but I forced myself up. The footsteps stayed behind me, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always there. Whoever it was knew the forest better than I did. That terrified me more than anything. I focused on one thing only, getting out. After what felt like forever, I heard a new sound. A faint hum, steady and low. It took a moment to realize it was traffic, a road. The sound gave me strength I did not know I had left. I pushed through thick bushes, ignoring the pain as thorns tore at my skin. The trees suddenly thinned, and I stumbled out onto gravel. A narrow road stretched in front of me, empty but real. I collapsed onto my knees and turned to look at the forest. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the trees. I saw movement between the trunks, but nothing came out. After a long moment, it faded back into the woods. I stayed there shaking for a long time. My body felt cold and hot at the same time. Eventually, a car passed, and the driver stopped when they saw me. I do not remember much after that, only the feeling of being safe again. Later, I reported everything. The police searched the area and found signs of an illegal camp deep in the woods. They told me I was lucky. Someone had been living out there, avoiding people, watching trails. Hearing that made my stomach turn. I still think about the woods sometimes. I think about how quiet it was, how normal it felt at first. The forest did not change. I did. I learned how easy it is to disappear, how thin the line is between a peaceful walk and something much worse. I never hike alone anymore, and I never ignore my fear. That day ended with me alive, but I know it could have ended very differently.
I went into the woods because I wanted to be alone and because I thought I knew what I was doing. It was late afternoon when I parked my car on the side of a quiet dirt road. The road was barely used, just 2 lines of tire marks through dry mud and leaves. I had been there before, months ago during the daytime when everything felt calm and open. Back then the trees looked friendly, spaced out with sunlight reaching the ground. This time felt different the moment I stepped out of the car. The air smelled wet and heavy, like old leaves and soil that had been sitting for years. It was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet. No birds, no wind moving the branches. I locked my car, checked my phone for signal even though I already knew there wouldn't be any, and put it in my pocket to save battery. I had a small backpack with water, a flashlight, and a snack. Nothing else, no weapon. I didn't think I needed one. The trail started clearly enough. A narrow path pressed down by other people's shoes, dirt packed hard in the middle. Trees surrounded it on both sides, tall and thin, their trunks dark and rough. As I walked, my shoes made soft crunching sounds on twigs and dry leaves. Every sound felt loud in my ears. I kept telling myself it was normal, that I was just tense for no reason. After maybe 20 minutes, the trail began to fade. The dirt path broke into patches and grass started growing through the middle. I slowed down and paid more attention to the ground, trying not to lose it. That's when I noticed the first thing that bothered me, a footprint. It was fresh, pressed deep into the soft dirt, deeper than mine. Bigger, too. I stopped and stared at it longer than I should have. People came here sometimes. That didn't mean anything. I told myself that and kept walking. The woods started to close in. The trees grew closer together, and branches reached across the path, brushing my arms and shoulders. The light changed. The sun was still up, but it couldn't reach me properly anymore. Everything turned gray and dull, like the world was slowly losing color. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time said I had been walking longer than I thought. That was when I heard something behind me. At first it was so faint I thought it was my own footsteps echoing. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. My heart started beating faster. I stood still, listening. There was nothing. No wind, no animals, nothing moving. I told myself I imagined it and took a few more steps forward. The sound came back. Slow, careful, leaves crunching under weight that wasn't mine. I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. Fear makes you do strange things. I think part of me didn't want to confirm what I already felt. When I finally looked back, there was nothing there. Just trees, just shadows. But the feeling didn't go away. I felt watched, like something was behind my eyes, pressing against the back of my head. I picked up my pace, not running but walking faster. My breathing grew heavier. Sweat formed on my neck and back, even though the air was cool. The trail disappeared completely after a while. I realized I didn't know where I was anymore. Every direction looked the same. Trees, dirt, roots, and darkness between them.
I heard the sound again, closer this time.
I didn't stop. I kept moving, stepping over roots, pushing past low branches. My mind started racing. I tried to remember how far I had walked, which direction the car was in, but it all blurred together. Panic made everything feel far away and unreal. I glanced down and saw another footprint, then another. They were following the same direction I was going. That's when I knew I wasn't alone. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I didn't hear breathing or footsteps clearly anymore, just enough to know something was still behind me. I started to jog, then run. My foot caught on a root and I almost fell. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. I forced myself to keep going. The forest floor changed. The ground dipped and became uneven. Mud stuck to my shoes, slowing me down. My legs burned. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I didn't want to make noise. I didn't want to let whoever was behind me know how scared I was. I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing. I stopped near a cluster of thick bushes and leaned forward, hands on my knees, trying to stay quiet while catching my breath. My ears rang. I listened hard. The footsteps stopped. That was worse. I crouched low and slowly backed into the bushes, letting the branches scrape my arms and face. I didn't care about the pain. I just wanted to be hidden. I turned off my phone completely so the screen wouldn't light up. I held my breath. Minutes passed. maybe longer. Time felt broken. My legs shook from holding still. Then I saw movement through the trees. A shape, darker than the shadows, moving slowly. I couldn't see a face clearly, just a body. Tall, careful. Whoever it was moved like they knew the area, stepping around noisy spots instead of through them. They passed close enough that I could smell them. Sweat and something sour. My stomach turned. I pressed myself deeper into the bushes, barely breathing. The shape stopped for a moment, like it was listening. I thought my heart would give me away. Then it moved on. I waited until my muscles hurt and my head felt light. When I was sure it was gone, I crawled out and stood up slowly. The sky was darker now. Evening was coming fast. I knew if night fell, I wouldn't survive this. I had to move.
I picked a direction and started walking, slower now, quieter. Every sound made me flinch. I didn't know if I was going the right way, but I kept going. The trees eventually thinned. I felt hope for the first time. Then I heard the footsteps again. They were closer than before. I ran. I didn't care about noise anymore. Branches whipped my face. My lungs burned. I could hear someone running too, no longer careful. Just fast and heavy. The ground sloped upward, and I climbed without thinking, hands and feet slipping on dirt and rocks. Suddenly, I broke through the trees and stumbled onto the dirt road, the same one where I parked. My car was still there. Relief hit me so hard my vision blurred. I ran to the car, shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. I heard movement behind me, but I didn't look back. I got the door open, threw myself inside, and locked it. I started the engine and sped away, gravel spraying behind me. I didn't slow down until the road turned into pavement and lights appeared. Only then did I pull over and let myself cry. I never went back to those woods. I never told myself it was just my imagination. I know what I heard. I know what I saw. Someone was out there, watching, following, waiting. And if I had stayed even a few minutes longer, I don't think I would have made it out. I went into the woods because I wanted to be alone, not because I was brave. I had been feeling heavy for weeks, the kind of heavy that sits behind your eyes and makes normal rooms feel too small. The trailhead was empty when I parked. No other cars, no voices, no movement except the trees shifting slowly in the wind. The sky was gray but calm, and the air smelled like wet leaves and cold dirt. I told myself I would walk for an hour, maybe two, then turn back before it got dark. At first, everything felt normal. My boots pressed into the soft ground, and the trail was clear enough that I didn't worry about getting lost. Birds moved somewhere above me, out of sight, and every now and then I heard branches creak as the wind pushed through them. I focused on the sound of my own breathing and the steady rhythm of my steps. The farther I walked, the quieter it became. Not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet, the kind where you notice every small sound because there's nothing else to cover it. After about 40 minutes, the trail split. I don't remember seeing that on the map I checked earlier. One path looked more worn, the dirt packed down and the leaves pushed aside. The other path was narrower and darker, covered in old leaves and pine needles. I stood there longer than I should have, feeling unsure, then took the narrower path. I told myself it would loop back around. I told myself a lot of things. The trees closed in quickly. The branches were lower here, scratching lightly at my jacket and hair as I passed. The ground sloped downward and the air felt colder, damp in a way that clung to my skin. I noticed the smell change too. It wasn't just earth and leaves anymore. It smelled sour, like something old and wet that had been sitting too long. I kept walking, but my pace slowed. The woods felt different, heavier, like I had stepped into a space that didn't get much light or attention. I started seeing things that didn't sit right, broken branches that didn't look like storm damage, scratches on tree trunks at about chest height, long and uneven, not like animal marks I had seen before. I told myself animals could do strange things. I told myself I was letting my imagination run.
Then I realized I hadn't heard birds for a while. The woods were completely still. No wind, no insects, nothing. My own footsteps sounded too loud, like I was announcing myself to something I couldn't see. I stopped walking and listened. My heart beat hard in my ears, and I felt that familiar tight feeling in my chest, the early edge of panic. That was when I noticed the footprints. They weren't clear like fresh tracks, but the ground was soft enough that shapes showed through the leaves. They were wrong, too narrow, too long, and spaced in a way that didn't match an animal moving on all fours. They followed the path in the same direction I was going. I crouched slightly, not touching them, just looking. The edges were blurred, like they weren't new, but not old either. I stood up and looked around, suddenly aware of how alone I really was. No phone signal, no nearby roads, no other people. Just trees and shadows. I turned around to head back, and that's when I realized the path behind me didn't look the same. It seemed narrower than it had before, more overgrown, like it had changed while I wasn't looking. I started walking faster, not running, but close. My breathing grew shallow, and my hands felt numb even inside my gloves. I kept checking behind me, feeling stupid and scared at the same time. Nothing was there, but the feeling didn't go away. It felt like being watched without seeing eyes. As I moved, the light faded faster than I expected. The trees blocked more of the sky, and the gray turned into something darker, thicker. I glanced at my watch and felt a cold drop in my stomach. More time had passed than it should have. I couldn't understand how. I pushed forward, hoping to find the main trail again. My boots slipped on wet leaves, and once I nearly fell. That's when I heard it. Not a voice, not an animal sound, just movement. Slow, steady movement behind me. Leaves shifting, branches brushing against each other. Whatever it was, it matched my pace. I stopped. The sound stopped. I took another step. The sound followed. My body reacted before my mind did. I broke into a run. My lungs burned almost immediately, and my legs felt heavy, but I didn't stop. Branches snapped against my arms and face. The ground dipped and rose without warning, and more than once I stumbled, barely catching myself before falling. The sound stayed with me. Always behind, never catching up, never falling back. It didn't rush. That was the worst part. It didn't need to. I ran until my chest hurt and my vision blurred. Then I tripped and went down hard. The air left my lungs in a sharp burst, and for a moment I couldn't breathe.
I lay there, face pressed into the cold dirt, listening.
Nothing. The silence came back, thick and complete.
I slowly pushed myself up, every muscle shaking. My knee throbbed where I had hit it, and my hands were scraped and bleeding. I forced myself to stand and look around. I was in a clearing I hadn't seen before. The trees formed a loose circle around it, and the ground was mostly bare dirt, packed down like it had been walked on a lot. In the center was something that made my stomach twist, a pile of old clothing, torn jackets, faded shirts, a single shoe. They were dirty and damp, some of them half buried. None of it looked new. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. Demeaning sat heavy in my chest. People had been here. People hadn't left. Delight was almost gone now. The woods were filling with shadows, and the temperature dropped fast. I knew staying there was not an option. I picked a direction and started walking, slow and quiet, every sense stretched tight. My ears rang with every small sound, and my eyes kept catching movement that disappeared when I focused on it. The movement came back, closer this time. I could hear breathing now, low and uneven, not animal, not human in any way that felt right. It moved through the brush without care, snapping branches, making no effort to hide anymore. I didn't run. I forced myself not to. It glowed, guys, keeping my step steady, my body screaming at me to move faster. The ground sloped upward, and through the trees I saw something that made my heart jump. A break in the darkness. Open space. I pushed forward and burst out of the trees onto a narrow service road. Gravel cut into my boots, and the open sky felt unreal after the closed-in woods. I didn't stop. I followed the road, half running, half limping, until I saw my car. I didn't look back when I reached it. I unlocked the door, got inside, and locked it again with shaking hands. Only then did I let myself breathe.
The woods stood quiet at the edge of the road, dark and still, giving nothing away. I drove without thinking, following the road until I hit pavement and then more familiar signs. My hands didn't stop shaking until I was miles away. When I finally pulled over, I sat there for a long time staring at my reflection in the windshield. Later, when I checked myself over under proper light, I found deep scratches on my jacket that hadn't touched my skin. Long marks, uneven and sharp. I threw that jacket away. I never went back to that trail. I looked it up online weeks later and found reports of missing hikers in that area, spread out over years, never connected, never solved. I didn't read much before closing the page. I know what I felt in those woods. I know something followed me, something patient and familiar with that place. I don't tell people the details. I don't need to. I stayed alive, and that is enough. Now, when I think about being alone, I choose places with walls and lights and other people nearby. The woods don't scare me because of what I imagine anymore. They scare me because of what I know can exist without ever needing to be seen.